podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. This is a Good Brothers edition of the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee. One love and respect to the family of George Floyd, to all the community out in Minnesota, and the people everywhere that need some love. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justice, what's happening?
Man, I'm good. It's a morning for recording, and so in light of, I think it wouldn't be a way to not talk about the outcome of the Derek Chauvin trial, and it's definitely, I would say a lot of people were waiting with apprehension around what would happen. I'll start out our conversation by saying, when I saw the number of police officers and police leadership that were testifying against him, I knew it was a wrap. And at least I was confident that it was a wrap, and that, and I would say, one, there's not a lot of these actual trials where police officers are tried for what has happened on duty in this fashion. But from just the experience that I do have, usually when you have other officers like, yeah, what he did was not what you were supposed to be doing in multiple forms, and especially leadership, pretty good chance you're not going to make it out of this,
Right.
And I thought that largely at least what I knew of it. Now I say, well, before I say that, what was some of your, where were you? What was sort of your own tracking of the case? Like, were you?
I tried. I think I'm at a space in my life where stuff I don't have like explicit control over, I try not to obsess over, because the more you pay attention to it, the more you kind of have. I think everyone should have an investment in making sure that there's justice, accountability, whatever terminology you want to use, for something that happens so often. Mm-hmm. However, outside of, was the prosecution good? Was the defense bad? Right.
Right.
And did they obviously prove what everybody saw? I tried to keep myself kind of separate from it. I will say, and this is just because of the reality of America as we stand, that like from 3:30 Eastern Standard Time to about 5 o'clock was some of the most stressful time I've had, because literally you knew that every city in America was a powder keg.
Right.
Right? That like, if that came out wrong, that every city in America was going to have possibly violent interactions with police that night and for the next couple of days. Right? Like, yep. It was literally like that. So there was a part of me that's like, oh man, I was literally on pins and needles for about an hour and a half. The thing that you hear or lawyers will say, or kind of traditional perspective on law, is kind of like this feeling of the quicker they come to a solution, sometimes that's good for the defendant, sometimes that's good for the prosecution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the faster it happened, you kind of think that means there weren't holdouts, right?
Right.
And if there weren't holdouts, that means that literally there were people who saw it and were thinking a very similar thing. So that's kind of what I would say that I generally, was like wasn't like paying that kind of attention. But that last hour and a half between, hey, we have a verdict and what the verdict is was really stressful.
Yeah. I actually want to build on that a little bit because at work we were actually having a team meeting, and like right going into the team meeting, it was like, oh, the Chauvin verdict is going to come out, like or the verdict is in, but they're not going to announce it. You know what I mean? For like 30 minutes or not. Like, you know what I mean? So at the time we starting the meeting, it's like, oh shit, they're going to announce this verdict, and if it do go the way people don't want it to go, I mean, a lot of people emotionally, and rightfully so, invested in the outcome. I mean, and we were also in the midst of, a young man was murdered overnight on Monday here, I guess, or Tuesday morning. Who was a lot of folks, in our work were connected with or knew. So we were dealing with that, respect and love to his family, and those that loved him and my teammates, and so we got that energy, and then this thing where it's like, this go the other way, it's gonna be a mess. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, in as much as I do undercut the national narrative of Portland as just like you can't drive your car past nothing because it's Antifa terrorists and Proud Boys fighting on every corner. You know what I'm saying? It's like dystopian nightmare. That's not the case. However, if this had, it would have been people in the streets for sure. Mm-hmm. Like the big showing. You know what I'm saying? The way folks was in the streets last year, at the high thousands numbers. You know what I'm saying? If that man had been made not guilty of those charges, but other than that, like I said, I think with you, I've also, I'm in the habit with these matters of trying to get enough to know what's going on, but not trying to like sit with it and like relay in it, so to speak. Like, oh, I got to read every article. I got to read everything. I'm going to go watch all of it. Like, I don't watch the videos of these things unless I have to. Like either like building with the kids or something, and they want to know. Like, I mean, I say the kids, my kids. Like I watch the video and I'm trying to sort it out. You know what I mean, kind of thing. Then I watch it so that we can be in the same headspace and talk about it. You know what I mean, or but otherwise, I'm like, this is not something that is necessarily healthy for you to get an understanding of what to do about this. Right, because you know what what it is, for someone. I mean, if you've seen it before, you know what it is for someone to be harmed, and especially to see someone being shot.
And the trauma. I mean, I think, and I think it's a challenge because we didn't have, I think it's hard for people to remember that we didn't always have a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah.
Right. That there was a time that like something happened, it was a special report, and then they went back to the television show.
Right. They'd be like, and now back to Jeopardy.
And now back to Three's Company, or now back to like Who's the Boss? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so this idea of omnipresent media, and we've talked about this with social media stuff, I think it has long-term negative effects of the trade-off of omnipresent information. Mm-hmm. Because you're constantly reliving a thing that, again, you may not control the outcome to, right? So if you think about the level of anxiety it fosters in people, only to come down, only to go back up. And I know we'll talk about that in a second, but I just think like that feeling of it is a broader long-term challenge in people's people's possible responses to minimizing how these things occur.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, on that note, just for the record, I'm pleased with him, being found guilty on all the charges. Mm-hmm. And, I will lose no sleep. I'm not, I empathize and I understand the larger moral cause of my brothers and sisters as it pertains to abolition of prison. Also, that man can't be out just living life.
Right.
What he
if you got rid of prison, where would he go?
Right. Like so whatever the future holds, he would be fully involved in that in whatever the retribution or the outcome that would wade from you doing such a heinous act. And I'm curious. I mean, I think the other 4, because I know their cases are coming up. I don't any of them testify against him. That I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, I tried to learn enough about the case, but I wasn't like watching it like, yo, it's time. 3:30, time turn on the trial. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not that's one, I don't have time for that, but 2, I wouldn't want to do that to myself. In did you have any other thoughts just about the trial itself and that world of like, is it going to be over?
Well, again, it's kind of, and it's interesting when you think about it. Like the first trial that we saw, like the entire trial, I felt like in this, I got to go back and make sure I'm historically accurate, was OJ.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So essentially, the last 25 years, we've been used to seeing trials, right? Like the entire trial on television.
Yeah.
What I saw or what people represented about who was talking and what they talked about, generally, I thought that the prosecution did a very good job of who they brought up, who had the conversations, how they responded, and as the Overton window of what we think is okay in America in regard to race has shifted in this case ever so slightly, the honesty that people had on the stand was really important.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The lack of the ability for the defense to turn people into non-human or one-dimensional or flawed witnesses was really, really important. And to your point, and you can take this positively or negatively, you do get the feeling that the system just decided that, and what I mean by the system here is the set of people who have an interest in maintaining kind of like police's current space to do what they do because of how they may feel like it is a position that is so difficult and things happen so fast. But I think there was a general thing between the chief and police and just a general thing across the country. If he's trash, like send him to the gulag. Like, you know what I mean? Like they were prepared to sacrifice him at the altar of accountability, right? And so I think you saw a couple of those things happen in a way that was unique, that also connected with what you saw on screen.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it just reference back to because I think like I believe really, like, if I remember right, what happened with OJ became really I think maybe the court TV as like a channel that just was trials all the time. I think it may have nascently existed, but I don't think, I think it, by the early 2000s, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I used to work in the customer service world of television industry or the television provider, so I know it was a channel, and people would go, yeah, I need that court TV. Like people that like that just want to watch court all day. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Talk about, Judge Joe Brown or divorce court.
I mean, you have fake court. Yeah, because you used to have fake court, like divorce court and all them, right? Which I call, that was like, divorce court was super buck wild, right? But that was like kind of like fake court, right? It was like court, but not court. You know what I'm saying? Court playing into the dimensions of like people's problems, right?
Yeah.
Versus just like, I want to watch a judge render a judgment.
Right, this case, you know what I'm saying? So my man over there, he robbed the bank, but actually robbing the bank was a kid. Like, it's like, I don't want this extra stress in my life, but you know what I mean? In any event, just the idea of public proceedings of this nature as entertainment is a strange one if you put a little thought into it. But so like that, just bringing it back, I'm always concerned with the voyeur, spectator value of this sort of situation, in that, there's real stakes if this case goes in a way that people are not happy with, their stakes, and even if it goes the way that people are happy with, and I think we should get to that, the how do you say, the people that had the think piece, or they had either the think piece for if he gets convicted, the think piece for he doesn't get convicted, written, right, to release as soon as it happens, as soon as they get the verdict, down to folks in their various levels of social media sharing who had this is my tweet for if he doesn't get convicted, this is my tweet if he does not get convicted, which would both either, more than likely would go, the one tweet is like, see, no, and then the other one will go, I mean, this is just one case. So if I had a nickel for all of the, white supremacy, you could sacrifice one of their own for the everybody. You are not the first person to think that, just in case you didn't know.
Well, that's the Truman Show of this whole social media thing. You're sharing your thought as if this is like the raw, unadulterated truth, right? Like you are the source of what others won't say, right? Yeah. Until you recognize everyone's saying it, and then you just retweet what they said. Yeah. Because now all of you are the real source of you are the real conscience of our country, right? You are the person that's figured out how to deal with this problem in a way that nobody will tell the truth but you.
Yeah, it's like, all right, and sometimes, maybe some of the people are prominent in a way that I'm not connected to. So therefore, like, I don't understand why it's significant that they're saying it. But in any event, this is sort of the behavior, right? This is the experience that I was expecting. Definitely there was still demonstrations here. I mean, and also there was demonstrations here, there's a crew that is the we still demonstrating nightly crew right now in Portland. And like every night they got, something. And then there's been some recent things here, people, speaking to it. But the wanting to see at least I think about it like this, it's 3 days later, 4 days later. And, I mean, the experience of Black people in America isn't over. I mean, but the actual parameters of what happens with that case and that man, have we move, to the next, right? So now folks will be eyeing and watching the trial of the other four. Now, my question, and I think it's actually from a policy and operational perspective, is going to be very interesting how those cases play out, because they speak to a duty of care of other officers while working together. Right? And if your fellow officer starts doing something that goes over the line, and what is your responsibility or duty to interrupt or stop them? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you saw a couple weeks ago, I think she was a New York Police Department officer who had actually got like fired, I think it was like 17 years ago, for stopping another officer from choking, you know what I'm saying, someone that they had apprehended or what have you, and a citizen, a human, a person.
Right.
And them retroactively going, yo, we was wrong about that. We shouldn't have actually fired you, or, whatever, the exact penalties that they laid upon her for stopping him.
Right.
killing that person. So like that, to me, in terms of what the experience is, what will be expected. I mean, we've seen a couple states take, in qualified immunity, within their state, and say, no, like if something goes out of pocket, you're not just going to be automatically protected. Which is a reminder, like I like to remind people that the various legislative bodies can actually make new laws that make stuff that may have been ruled this way or that way by the Supreme Court, no longer the rule, because, ultimate authority lies with Congress. Actually, to make the laws in our country. That's how civics works. So everybody go read about how the stuff's supposed to operate. So,
and with that, I think it's important to remember that that's why Republicans, generally speaking, the Republican Party and conservatives or people who have an interest within that particular party, as well as some Democrats, made sure to control state level politics.
Yeah.
Because those are where, those things occur. And then Republicans on a national level do, work to make sure that you don't preempt the states. Right. So if you think about it, it's a really smart political strategy, right? Get power at the state level and then spend all your time at the federal level saying you can't preempt the states.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So therefore, whatever the state says, and then so many of our states, because of demographics, tend to be dumbbells or tend to be urban centers where you find, Black folks, indigenous folks, and people of color, as well as liberal/progressive white folks, and then a whole bunch of other folks, who think differently.
Yeah.
And some of those folks could be Black, indigenous, people of color as well, right? I don't want to, I think we should sometimes be careful about framing it like every Black person is a Democrat or agrees with democratic orthodoxy, because it's not true. But so I say that to say that I think, to your point about qualified immunity and this shift, I think in cities you see a shift, but in states, it's still been difficult to see that shift. And I think states that where the demographics have changed is where you see the shifts, like Virginia, starting like I think last week. They can't stop you for a U-turn, can't stop you for a broken tail light. There's a whole bunch of host of things that are generally where some of these police-citizen interactions begin that they have eliminated on a state level, because Virginia now, the House of Delegates and their state Senate are controlled by Democrats. So it just reinforces like kind of caring about all levels of your civics and not just the civics that pertain to situations like the trial, but like civics beyond the trial.
Yeah. So, in other sad revelations or occurrences within the context of the timing of the trial, we had 2 additional, Black people killed by police in while this was happening, and I don't want to dwell in it no more, but very long. But I just want to iterate that, in terms of the larger systemic matter, right? The macro level matter. I guess macro might be a better way to describe it. That with when we talk about people dying at the hands of police, we are talking about a macro issue. We're talking about an aggregate, the whole country, looking at it. Because in any one individual outside of though in Columbus, I think that's the 4th Black person killed in the last 4 months by an officer, of whatever level or whatever the situation may be. I'm sad to say that the clock is still still hitting, from when we talked about this when the original incident happened last summer or last spring, that sadly if you're monitoring, you're going to see one pretty regularly. And we didn't make it out the summer without additional deaths. We didn't make it out of the fall, and we didn't make it out the winter. And now we're not going to make it out the spring, right? And so just for folks that are struggling to understand like why Black people as a group or as a focus as a group, I would say, I feel comfortable saying that, we are concerned about Black police officers continuing to kill us. Whatever the circumstances in the actual incident, is still a result of someone being not alive. So whether they were not guilty of a crime, whether they were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, whatever, they don't have the opportunity to sort that affair out because they're not with us anymore. And that's not a reasonable risk level that we should be asked to like be okay with. I think that's how I would phrase it, for people, I think to try to get to the pinpoint of what is at the heart of folks' angst and anger. Now, other people may frame it differently, but that's how I would frame it. And so,
I think there's just one thing I'll say about that. There's just a lack of safety, right? there's a variety of situations that end up with police citizen interaction or police and Black citizen interaction. I think it's important to reinforce that people are citizens and should be afforded the right of citizenry, right? That's not just Black people. It's not just Black bodies. It's a citizen of this state, right? Which automatically should endow you with certain, as they say, I'm not a lawyer, but inalienable rights, right? But the conditions in which this continues to happen would point you to that citizens of a particular color continue to run up to a place of a lack of safety as far as it pertains to the interactions. Now, I want to be thoughtful and say, if we think about all the possible police citizen interactions in a day versus the people who were killed, it's still a relatively small number. Obviously not infinitesimal or any of those hyperbolic statements, but small. However, in reference to the broader society, the fact that the numbers are higher point to a fact of a broader lack of safety. If it is a lack of safety because of laws of being able to stop somebody because of a tree, of a scent tree, if it's something that passes where I'm going to say, and not go too far into it, where there's a collective failure of community. And then, but on top of that, even if there is a collective failure of community, we do not expect that the people who are paid to protect people, that it would end up in a much similar way that other police citizen interactions end up, right?
Right.
So there's just a lack of safety. And a lot of us have internalized the lack of safety and managed the lack of safety. It's just something to be said for groups of people who are no longer internalizing and managing the lack of safety in the way I think past generations have. Right?
Right.
Where it was just like part of the calculus of our lives.
Right. Right. You instituted other, functional countermeasures to make yourself more safe, from
you just charge it to the game, like so to the point where you charge police acting in inappropriate ways to the game, if you will, which is an important statement there, to the game. And so people are not. And so they're just, to your point, I think you said in a very clear way. And for me, it's just that lack of safety. It's the lack of safety. No matter what's happening, we don't know how this interaction is going to end, right? Where we should generally assume that, except in certain extreme cases, that everyone comes out alive, whether you're guilty or innocent, right? Because the court systems should actually find out if you're guilty versus a somewhat what has become an extrajudicial space of some police officers.
Right.
So
from there, I guess the only, my other big thoughts. I mean, and one, just while we're having this conversation, much love and respect to George Floyd and his family and everyone that was close to him. And hopefully this brings some additional measures of closure for them wherever they're at, in their ongoing grieving process. For you, in your early estimation, or even look at this, because I don't know what the, I guess circling back to like sort of the commentary on the matter, do you think that this potentially points to, some broader, acceptance that, we've, all right, here's a better way to frame it. We've talked about, I think, in our previous conversation when all this happened, and then some subsequent conversations over the last year about sort of the price of doing business as it pertains to these matters, right? And so like, well, this is how we do things, and occasionally the police are going to go too far, but we'll do a settlement with the family, hopefully, and, keep on pushing. Like we'll just keep on going. Do you think there's a potential for really some more, leverage change sort of in whatever that equation looks like, based on, on this man being actually
found
guilty.
So I guess I want to touch on a little bit this, what emerged at this conversation of social media of justice versus accountability. And so I watched Attorney General Ellison talk, and he was the first one that kind of talked about, that justice is about restoration.
Mm-hmm.
And that this was a part of accountability on your way to restoration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't juxtapose justice and accountability.
Yeah.
He kind of shared that justice is a fuller, more robust state, right? As you know, it's
right.
a fuller, more robust state of existence, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where accountability is a part and parcel of the more robust state. It's interesting that once it started being shared, it started to be this dichotomy of justice versus accountability. Saying justice just is one part of accountability, not acknowledging that we have operated without accountability. Right? That the cost of doing business was so low that there was no accountability when someone dies other than a civil suit, right? Like no one had to face going to jail if you did something criminal or did something you perceived as criminal, right?
Right.
That it is almost assured that you were going to get off, right? So I think in that, and I'm on the top of the 8 here dealing with, the process of being positive. If you had an example of accountability, it starts to reinforce that there can be accountability. Now,
right.
I would argue this is such an obvious, some would almost call extreme case, that you would assume there would be accountability, but millions of us thought there was not going to be, right? So I think accountability is a path to justice. It doesn't mean that justice can never happen. It doesn't mean you got to be all mad and have the crabby face, right, about what happened in the trial. It just means if you start to see this happen and you think of a restoration of the citizenry of all people, then that's a good thing. I think in this case, and I don't know how it's going to go for some of the other ones, I think some of the other ones are going to be much more, frankly, perceived as hazy and perceived as what's happening in the space of the process. That, getting this sense of if we see it and know it, that someone pays the price, I think that's important. So I think that changes a little bit. I think some of the laws that are change a little bit. And I think that, frankly, the cost of doing business culturally shifts, where I think sometimes some officers are going to think twice about some of the things that before were normalized.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a good thing. Right? That's a good thing that you think about, okay, do I really want to get into this? Where before it's like, hey, I make a decision. If I mess up, I messed up, but I'm a cop. Versus, no, you know what? I can't just do whatever I want to this person, right? I literally can't. Because there's some accountability. It's being taped, it's being seen, and I have to deal with it. So, I just wanted to touch on that because I think justice and accountability got so juxtaposed that was almost like if you had any sense of relief or any sense of contentment, even in short term, that you were insufficiently woke.
Right. And that and that's me being justice. I got to thinking, I'm like, well, damn, how's anybody ever get to spend time with me? It's like, well, how do we? Yeah, because I'm very, it is our way. I'm very particular about what are you saying is the end goal to know when you get there? Like,
right,
in all things, but particularly in this, and I don't. The determination to create a binary, you know what I'm saying? This is not at least, to the degree where I many a person saying there's no possibility of justice ever.
Right.
Which, my mind goes to, So y'all want to be in perpetual pain?
And we might as well close this shop down.
Like, what are we doing? Like, should I
stop being me? Should I stop be lighting the world with my positive energy?
I'm like, all right, man. Well, I guess you know what I'm saying. Like, it's and I, you know, I can understand it. You know, people being in, you know, fraud and in despair or anger or upset and in various grief and these things, and people saying things that maybe they don't, you know, they don't mean in full. And I dig that. I dig all that. But it's like I'm invested in understanding the exercise of liberation as it pertains to how you talk about where you're going. Right. And if the way that you know, our especially our kids, but also like everyone, they pick up on if the answer is always basically you can't win, in some way that you subconsciously start going, yeah, you can't win. So I'm not really going.
Why play? That's right.
I'm not even going to play all like that. You know what I'm saying? Like to see the eventual society that we want that again creates the parameters, right? You know, that we set up the rules and the policy. So the parameters for broad opportunity for us to be able to live or how we need to live are there. You know, we have to be a proactive force in our own experience and then setting the tone to the external, you know, entities that we have to move through with and by. That yeah, here's how you can be so that we can do our thing and you not be impeding upon it. You know what I'm saying? If you know, you don't have to join us, you don't have to be coming to our functions, you know what I'm saying? But you can't use your undue position, size, you know, historical advantage due to you know, an imbalanced at a minimum history to interrupt, you know, our own, you know, work to improve the condition and the quality of our own lives. And this is like, for us, you know, I'm always very concerned, like, what is our messaging to ourselves? What are we saying to ourselves? What are we telling our young people? You know, the struggle of protests and civic action are great works, but they're not the end goal. The end goal is the ability to live a life, you know, that is reflective of your value system and who you are, and have
unrestricted by systems and right. According to your color or orientation or gender or country of origin or any other thing.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I want. Like I don't want to just be able to be like I was out there and I was in this ongoing protracted, you know, fight with you, whatever entity that may be. I think it's very interesting too, and I think, you know, I think that there is, and it's at least my own messaging in the places where I need to engage, and like I said, to confirm again for the record, I've worked in service programming and services work with youth families involved with the criminal justice system for the last, you know, almost decade, and I talk to police officers. I have a relationship with, you know, all the different parts of the apparatus, as it were. And you know, one of my things for any police action is about what is the accountability structure, right? What are if you have police deployed in a certain way and they're doing a certain thing, how, if something is like, how do we know? How do we check, right? Because as a programmatic person, to get any money for your program, you got all kinds of stuff they checking. Checking where you spent the money, who your staff are. You know, now, you know, it ain't the 80s or the 90s no more, where I think a lot of them times, you know, a person with, you know, without certain things on their record or without a certain academic background may have had a hard time getting an opportunity to even work. Well, I mean, I'm saying with young people or people that may be, you know, involved in the streets as the nomenclature would go. We've moved along a lot further there, but there's still that aspect, right? And you know, program and service providers are pushed to prove that what they're doing is working, right? where, you know, the other pieces of our apparatus are not really, I mean, they're asked to study themselves, but there's no threat within there that like they're going to shut down. like if we don't see improvement, we're taking the whole police force off the street for 2 months so we can reassess how we need to do this. Like that,
right?
Never in the mix, right? For the system, the DA's office is never like, yeah, man, we haven't really prosecuted a lot of cases of this nature. We need to shut the whole thing down for 3 months and to have an auditor come in and decide if we should still be prosecuting. No, like the system, the state apparatus keeps moving, you know, and I ain't saying that it needs to or doesn't need to. I'm saying we need to understand that as a functional process where community entities, you know, advocacy, whatever have you, if you're depending on funding, partnership with a county or a city or state or federal funding, you know, you got, I mean, especially if you do any federal program, you do a OJDC grant, you know what I'm saying? You got mad paperwork. I mean, all federal. Anybody's ever been involved in a federal grant of any kind, you know, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think it's good. It's the people's money. You need to make sure that you're doing your business. I think as a community members, it doesn't appear that police, parole, probation, you know, these other entities have the same level of public accountability, and you know, really tying in though on because I think some of those other pieces would tell you like actually they don't like to be tied in that they're law enforcement. They're a service that does a different role, and I respect that. So I think that there's something there in terms of like at least if deployed and communicated correctly, especially to police authorities or units or forces that may be a little bit like feeling as if, you know, all of this is overblown, you know, and some of that in a sense, at least as it pertains to killing people, Black people and other people, you know, in the line of their work, it may be true because they may not have killed anybody in that department for years, or, you know, maybe it's only 1 or 2 in that particular, you know, municipality or whatever. But all the other stuff, right, where people do not, you know, are struggling with the presence and the role that police play, you know, how like we had to be able to get to the place where we can go like, listen, your department has not killed anyone. That doesn't mean that people are pleased with how they experience contact with you. And I think accountability though is the thing that people just really want. They want something goes well. You know, officers want to, you know, people want to give officers credit and love and systems in those services credit and love. When things don't go well, we want you to own it. They go, yeah, that wasn't right, and we need to assess the activity of the officer, and then we as leadership need to access: did we set this situation up right? Right? Was the training, was the way we've deployed, what we've talked about to be the focus? Like, because all those things are the things that, as in any other work that is public facing, you would assess the activity of the individual and then how they were aligned, positioned, and what they were told, set out to do. And so, you know, I don't know if I'm optimistic about it. I'm definitely not pessimistic because I'm just not a pessimistic person. But you know, I'm just gonna stay in my like I will watch and observe to see if we see some movement. You know, I think there's opportunity, but I think that you know, you never know. It's America. I mean, things could go bad quickly. I think though, to circle back on that, do you have any thoughts on like why did so many of us go to this like accountability versus justice dichotomy? Like,
I think we're all pinging off of each other's needed skepticism of systems, and we've turned it into a kind of like what was it, the kid in the Peanuts that had the rain over him at all times?
Oh yeah, the Pigpen.
Pigpen, he had the dust with him. I think it was another kid, but okay. Basically the person that's like the system of nothing's going to change, because we I think to some degree we've accepted this permanence of white supremacy and racist systems in a way of like nothing changes until it's all gone.
Mm-hmm.
And my personal perspective is that that's not true. You can't tell people who may have been alive in the 1900s that like the world we got today is wouldn't have been better than the world they had then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's still permanence of systemic racism, but it can be more or less pernicious, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the situation. So I think we've gotten to this all or nothing idea that, again, unless, or like the very statements too, we're all free. None of us are free, right? Mm-hmm. Which sounds good, but there's different levels of freedom, right? Mm-hmm. And to say that no one's totally free or exist or experiencing freedom, and so everybody is experiencing freedom, kind of can frame the space of more just the permanence and lack of change versus kind of from an organizing perspective, you got to keep people in the mix. You got to keep people in play. And it can't be all negative if you want to keep people in play. Yeah. Right? You got to give people the next thing they're going to and why they're doing it. Yeah. And take the small win and build on the small win. Not douse their joy with your reality bites.
Right.
You know what I mean? But again, I think social media has a unique way of doing that because you're getting exposure to these thoughts that people have that they think are the socially appropriate thought to have.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, again, from an organizing perspective, it can be a challenge because you've created a space where people think saying nothing's going to change. Why participate unless in dysfunctional ways anyway? Because I think there's a population of people, how should we say, in our proletariat who thinks like, man, I ain't going out there unless there's opportunity to crash some shit up because ain't nothing going to change. They've accepted the permanence of white supremacy in a different way. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I just think we, from an organizing perspective, we have to be, thoughtful, and not go there. And it is a small victory in the broader sense of it. But again, for that family, for the situation, to defuse the powder keg that was every city in America because of what happened, and because at least when the verdict that was reached, that it made common sense with what everybody saw. That's an important step.
Yeah. Any only thought I had two thoughts. One that hopefully be a little more levity. One though I thought about was definitely and I didn't watch every blow by blow of the defense's case, but it felt like they went for the big bad drug addled black man, big,
oh man,
the drug addled beast. We can't control him. Like that whole, they went for that whole play, and the jury was like, "Come on, dog."
Oh no, they went to classic tropes, right? I mean, essentially, the defense's only option was to go to tropes of black people, that he had drugs in his system, that he had COVID, and that he was sick for all these other things, and that basically, since he was just a flawed, sick individual, you never know.
Right.
Shit happens.
Which is a wild convergence of black trope stereotypes, that he was simultaneously the superhuman strength, supersized, dangerous, black monster of your nightmares, and he was sick and feeble and weak and brittle internally, like, at the same time.
Inside. That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So like that, I mean, that's a crazy set of things, or wild, or what have you. That's strange. That's strange mix they tried to pull off. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, if to whatever, and I don't know the composition again of the jury, but I'm assuming it's Minnesota. Pretty sure it wasn't, a whole lot of, I mean, it might have been some sprinkles. You know what I'm saying? If it was you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure that the complexion and the composition probably fit what you would expect in
Minnesota.
In Minnesota, you know what I'm saying? So, I think that's in terms of the minds of the people perspective, that folks maybe didn't fall for that one. You know what I mean? Because that's been a reliable construction that you can come in with a black person, you know what I'm saying, specific, generally, to other persons of color, I think as well, although I think the flavor is a little different depending on, the other, ethnic potential origins and structures or nationalities. But definitely with black men, you get superhuman strength, be violent by nature, and then he was on drugs, so he was uninhibited. You know what I'm saying? Like, so therefore, we had to do whatever we could to stop the big black beast. You know what I'm saying? Like that's still an idea that is in play, and an idea that backs up sort of the assumptions that the decision making that has to follow in order to deal with that entity. At least if not are not sound, should be given a moment of pause to think about that they could be. And so I'm hopeful that maybe for whatever reasons, I can't cite any particular reason why those people didn't. I mean, well, I guess I could cite that I'm like, yeah, and this, I guess, is my only other retort to the folks that are like, yeah, come to like the political the elected official comments that have been said, that were said, or at least were put in articles that have supposedly been said either to the family or to the public or whatever, may provide some sort of grounds for his appeal. My other thought is that everyone saw you on a video with your knee on an man's neck for 9 minutes. Where on earth do you think that, given the conditions, man, maybe you shouldn't have been in the habit of putting your knee on people's necks. Like, I think that there's a pretty strong case to go like, yeah, whatever, man, get out of here, go and sit down. So hopefully that will stay in that place.
Yeah.
And then I guess my other, like I said, more levity. Now, I didn't see the moment. Maybe I can go back and watch the video of, I guess, the verdict being given, because the snapshot of his face, where his eyes definitely read like, oh snap, they finding me guilty. Like, I don't know if he really thought he was going to get off.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's America. Anything can happen. It's like kind of like, wait, hold on. I really got detention. It's like you was a kid, like you did something, and then they called you down to the office. Like, they really called me down to the office? You gonna call my mom? What?
Like, what?
This is very. I don't give my mom call for this. Yeah, you do, Jack. You do now. And so my man, clearly acting with a sense of conferred power or societal power made him feel like he could take liberties that a jury found he could and should not take. Yeah. He realized that when his face lit up, like a kid that got their mom called when they hear the verdict.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And again, that's the accountability and the broader challenge and the broader opportunity. Yeah. Right? You see both at the same time. You know what I mean? I'm not going to focus on the obvious opportunity. I'm going to focus on the accountability we got that day, what it showed, and what it could possibly mean going forward. Again, not assuming that the other ones will end up like that.
Yeah. Man, all right. Well, I mean, I think we covered that.
Well, I think we appropriately, and everybody, listen, man, let people have their place of celebration, even if you feel that it's misplaced. Yeah. Because that keeps them in the game. Absolutely. Right? Any movement that's filled with a whole bunch of unhappy campers, if you learned anything from the civil rights movement, you got to have a North Star, and you got to have some joy and some thought that you're gonna get to there. Yeah, yeah. If not, you're not going to do it long term. So, yeah.
So, again, in closing, expecting love to the family of George Floyd. You know what I'm saying? Expecting love to, other folks, families across the country that are in the midst of or still dealing with the reverberations of past incidents, and maybe see more accountability in the near future on these matters. So,
my man.
With that, I say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, Majestic. thank you to you, the listeners. Please share, rate, subscribe, leave a comment, something down there, and help us keep this thing moving forward. We record the podcast as regularly as we can, and try to be caring and honest in our commentary and feedback and thought, deliberation, what have you, on the topics we cover. Hope that you found something of value that is meaningful for you. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Just search for Ask Your Oldhead, and you will find my little logo and an opportunity to support there. You can also support by purchasing a sweatshirt or other item from the Etsy shop. Again, if you search Ask Your Oldhead on Etsy, you will find the work, the business, so to speak. Again, one love and respect to the family of George Floyd, folks all over the country that are dealing with the challenge and the trauma related to these events, and the death of citizens and people at the hands of police. And then in any event, man, just be safe, make good decisions, and we'll see you soon. Peace.